Welcome to Prayer and Bible Band, Lesson 10. I do not own the rights to this music. Today's topic is trusting God. The background reading is coming out of Psalm chapter 20, verse 7. Psalms chapter 37, verses 3 through 5. Psalms 118, verses 8 through 9. Psalms chapter 4, verse 5. Proverbs chapter 16, verse 20. Proverbs chapter 28, verse 25. Isaiah chapter 26, verses 2 through 4. The devotional reading is coming out of Daniel chapter 3, verses 13 through 25. Psalms chapter 20, verse 7. This is the King James Version. Some trust in chariots and some in horses, but we will remember the name of the Lord our God. Psalms chapter 37, verses 3 through 5. Trust in the Lord and do good, so shalt thou dwell in the land, and verily thou shalt be fed. Delight thyself also in the Lord, and he shall give thee the desires of thine heart. Commit thy way unto the Lord, trust also in him, and he shall bring it to pass. Psalms 118, verses 8 and 9. It is better to trust in the Lord than to put confidence in man. It is better to trust in the Lord than to put confidence in princes. Psalms chapter 4, verse 5. Offer the sacrifices of righteousness and put your trust in the Lord. Proverbs chapter 16, verse 20. He that handleth a matter wisely shall find good, and whoso trusteth in the Lord, happy is he. Proverbs chapter 28, verse 25. He that is of a proud heart stirreth up strife, but he that putteth his trust in the Lord shall be made fat. Isaiah chapter 26, verses 2 through 4. Open ye the gates, that the righteous nation which keepeth the truth may enter in. Thou wilt keep him in perfect peace, whose mind is stayed on thee, because he trusteth in thee. Trust ye in the Lord forever, for in the Lord Jehovah is everlasting strength. Daniel chapter 3, verses 13 through 25. Then Nebuchadnezzar, in his rage and fury, commanded to bring Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Then they brought these men before the king. Nebuchadnezzar spake and said unto them, Is it true, O Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego? Do not ye serve my gods, nor worship the golden image which I have set up? Now if ye be ready, that at what time ye hear the sound of the cornet, flute, harp, sackbut, psaltery, and dulcimer, and all kinds of music, ye fall down and worship the image which I have made. Well, but if ye worship not, ye shall be cast the same hour into the midst of a burning fiery furnace. And who is that God that shall deliver you out of my hands? Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego answered and said to the king, O Nebuchadnezzar, we are not careful to answer thee in this matter. If it be so, our God whom we serve is able to deliver us from the burning fiery furnace, and he will deliver us out of thine hand, O king. But if not, be it known unto thee, O king, that we will not serve thy gods, nor worship the golden image which thou hast set up. Then was Nebuchadnezzar full of fury, and the form of his visage was changed against Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Therefore he spake, and commanded that they should heat the furnace 7 times more than it was wont to be heated. And he commanded the most mighty men that were in his army to bind Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and to cast them into the burning fiery furnace. Then these men were bound in their coats, their hosen, and their hats, and their other garments, and were cast into the midst of the burning fiery furnace. Therefore, because the king's commandment was urgent, and the furnace exceeding hot, the flames of the fire slew those men that took up Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And these 3 men, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, fell down bound into the midst of the burning fiery furnace. Then Nebuchadnezzar the king was astonished, and rose up in haste, and spake, and said unto his counselors, Did not we cast 3 men bound into the midst of the fire? They answered and said unto the king, True, O king. He answered and said, Lo, I see 4 men loose, walking in the midst of the fire, and they have no hurt. And the form of the 4th is like the Son of God. The central verse for today's lesson is Proverbs chapter 3, verse 5. I will read the King James Version first, and then the New International Version. Trust in the Lord with all thine heart, and lean not unto thy own understanding. The New International Version. Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and lean not on your understanding. The key terms for today's lesson are consequence and epidemic. Consequence, a conclusion derived through logic, something produced by a cause or necessarily following from a set of conditions. Epidemic, affecting or tending to affect a disproportionately large number of individuals within a population, community, or region at the same time. The introduction for today's lesson. Trust is something that every human must learn and have to live a fulfilled, balanced life. It will be a very miserable life to live a life mistrusting everybody and everything. Humans start learning who and what people to trust as babies. Babies usually come into the world filled with trust. They trust everybody and everything. Most people, when they first get saved, are so full of love and joy that they love and trust everybody. However, as they develop their relationship with God, the God in them begins to let them know who to trust and who not to trust, just as a mother teaches her baby. Trust is a firm belief in the reliability, truth, ability, or strength of someone or something. Then the believer is trusting God, believing in his reliability, his word, his ability, and his strength. The discussion. Trusting God gives believers so many benefits that they would not have if they didn't trust God. The devil wants God's children to doubt and mistrust him so they can forfeit the good things that God has for them. As the new believer reads and studies God's word, he begins to have confidence in the word, and as his confidence grows, his trust is developed. All the doubts in his mind begin to leave until he can say, as the old Pentecostal song says, "You can't make me doubt him, because I know too much about him." The more a person learns about something or someone, the more comfortable and confident he becomes about that person or that thing. The time we are in now has brought many challenges onto and upon the people of God. Many of these challenges are a challenge to the very belief and trust that believers have in and about God. Some of these challenges are designed to cause doubt in the mind of believers. Our generation is faced with an epidemic in the field of medicine. For believers who love and have lived for God are dying of diseases that God's word says they should be healed of. So many believers are dying of Alzheimer's disease, which is memory loss. But God's word tells the believers that He will keep them in perfect peace if they keep their minds on Him and trust Him. Now, trust is a little different from faith, but it is one of the products of faith that God grants to the believers. Ephesians chapter 2, verses 8 and 9. For by grace are ye saved through faith, and that not of yourselves, it is the gift of God, not of works, lest any man should boast. Trust is a natural consequence of faith. It is because of the believer's faith in God that he can trust God. Life often presents unseen challenges that knock believers to their knees and sometimes throw them off course. In these difficult times, believers must hold fast to the profession of their faith and trust God's timing and His process. Trusting God's process will renew, settle, and strengthen him for this life's journey. That's when the believer must trust in the Lord and not rely on his own understanding. That's the time he must release the things he can't control, allowing his trust in God based on His word and His fulfillment of His promises to him. Sometimes the believer must go back to the word and get fresh teaching and inspiration that will renew his faith and develop a godly perspective on even the most difficult trials and challenges. This will help build his trust daily in his God. Throughout the book of Psalm, King David shared his need to trust God through the many challenges in his life. He learned how to trust in God and depend upon His word. He shared how he had to trust God and rely upon His godly wisdom through unfair and unjust treatment. He was able to share how he had to redirect his focus off unfair suffering back to the loving and forgiving God. If anyone had a reason to be afraid and fearful, it would have been the 3 Hebrew boys who were taken from their homes. They were taken from their families to a strange land. Names were changed. They lost their freedom, and they had to adjust to a different custom and language. The king was trying to get them to give up their God for other gods, and they refused to bow and worship these other gods. They told the king they would not bow because they trusted God so much that if He didn't deliver them, they knew He could. Every believer must trust God more than trusting a king. When believers trust and acknowledge God, He puts direction and protection in their lives. The fire was so hot that it burned up the men who threw them in the furnace. But the trust and faith of the Hebrew boys allowed God to work on their behalf. The next day, when the king looked in the hot furnace, he saw a 4th man. The king said, "That man looked like the Son of God." The conclusion says, It takes courage to stand tall when you are going through pain, grief, or seemingly impossible situations, and yet trust God. But the believer knows that he can do all things through God and knows that God is on his side. They must not be afraid of God, but they must fear him, love him, and trust him. The questions for today's lesson. Question 1. What is one of the positive results of trusting God? Question 2. How does trusting God connect with faith in God? And question 3. How can a believer develop more trust in God? The essential thought says, trusting God always brings positive results. The end. God bless you and thank you for joining me today.